going to jump into a very quick recap of what we've done already. So particularly for those of you who haven't been with us each week, we'll let you know what some of the topics we've already talked about, and then we'll jump into today's topic. So over the last 3 weeks, we've looked at different tools that we can use, so the lean canvas in particular, and also a validation board, making sure that we're considering who is our customer and are we actually having good quality conversations with them to be able to understand what their problems are, find out if they actually have a willingness to pay for a solution, and how we can actually provide a unique solution and unique value to that particular customer for the issues that they're having. Also looking at whether there's a niche within the market that we need to be trying to identify to make sure we're not spreading ourselves too thin and trying to solve the problems for too many, but also making sure, of course, there's enough of a market for us to run a viable business, because we don't want to spend a whole lot of time and money building something that nobody wants. So we talked about who has the problem and looking at the different types of customers that we might be engaging with, both you know, those who might be making the decision and paying for the solution, those who might be using it or influencing. So thinking about the different people and the problems that they uniquely have to each other, even though they may be part of the same organisation, and we may have a solution that kind of fits for all of them, but we need to address it in ways that they understand and they care about. We also want to make sure that when we're looking in those early stages where our time is very precious, that we're focusing on our ideal customer, and that is one who's looking for a solution and cares about the problem, does have that willingness and capacity to pay as well, because some people may want what we are doing but might not be able to afford it, and we have to be cognizant of that. And also making sure that if we're in the process of still developing our solution, that our ideal customer is someone who's willing to help design that solution by providing what we may not have access to otherwise. Sometimes that's data or pilot options or whatever it might be to test and trial our new solution. So that's who we're looking to engage with and connect with. We want to make sure in all of those conversations that we're getting the information we need from them. So being able to, again, validate a lot of our assumptions around what the pain points are for that customer, what is the job that they're actually trying to do, and what are they trying to achieve from that, what are the gains they're looking for, so that as we design our solution, we can make sure that the way we communicate it, as well as the features that we bother building at this point in time, are actually addressing those key pain points or those key elements that our customer's looking to gain from doing this particular task. So we want to make sure that both our product but our language all mix to make sure that the message is received and what we're building does the job that it needs to do, and not wasting money on extra things that aren't required. So we want to make sure that we understand all of that and what they need to see value in what we're doing. We also talked more then about minimum viable product, and how when we're building a minimum viable product, that it's not just functional, it also needs to be convenient, you know, enjoyable to use, meaningful to the customer. And again, just looking at that slice of pie as such, and making sure it's covering a bit of everything, and then gradually growing as we increase what we can do for our customer. But we've got to make sure that they enjoy the process of, well, using the solution, but dealing with us in the process as well, to make sure that they'll continue to deal with us in the future. So we looked last week at business models and some of the different types of business models, and the fact that a lot of people are now very much focused around having hybrid business models with lots of diverse income streams to protect themselves against times of change, which we are very familiar with at the moment. So making sure that you're not just being extremely narrow in only offering one type of method of being able to deal with your client. So looking for a variety of different options, thinking of the different types of revenue streams that you might be able to bring in with your product, whether you can just sell it to them or sell them after sales service or a license or whatever it might be, again, to change the way revenue flows into your business. And also thinking about your business as an asset. So at the end of the day, it's probably your business that you'll want to sell, not just your product. So making sure that you're building the components of a business that is also saleable, and thinking about what that is. Also, of course, in getting your customers and building your audience, we want to make sure that we're thinking of not only how we get them, but how we keep them and how we grow our customer base and the different activities that we can put into place to make sure we're focused on those different elements. So both acquisition and activation in the first instance. It's one thing to get a customer, it's another thing to make them actually use your product and keep wanting to use it. It's another thing then again to get them to come back the next time they need it, and of course to then refer their colleagues or other organisations or their friends, whatever it might be, to talk about you, for you, and of course to pay you is always very important. And having a pipeline management system, so something that's going to allow you to actually collect this data and track it through the various stages. And these are very simple ones, so around, are you aware of someone who could potentially be your customer, and are they aware of you? Are they interested? Are they at the point of making a decision? And are they at the point of taking action? And can you help curate that by doing something that will make them become aware of you? So perhaps putting something out that is a gift as such, whether that's data, whether that's information on whatever you're doing, whether it's something else that your customer might just engage with to know that you're there, sponsoring a sports team or whatever it might be, the sample. So can they actually start to interact with you? Can they start to experience your product or service in some way? And can you collect something that you need from them as an exchange there? So it may be a smaller amount of money or data, contact details, time, information, whatever it might be. And then obviously your core product. So can you deliver? Can you solve their problem? Will they be happy with that? And then if you're doing that, what next? What else does your customer need to then, be able to continue to grow their business, and they're using your solution? What else do they need at the same time or immediately after that you might be able to help curate their ongoing, purchases or whatever that may be, either by introduction to another organisation that you have a relationship with, or obviously increasing your range of what you do if that's within your scope at this point in time. So there's a lot that we've covered already. And today we're going to move on to obviously some new topics. And as I said, I'll just quickly introduce these. I'm conscious my time is over here of the time, so I want to try and keep this to about 20 minutes. So I will move through it fairly quickly. If you have a question, you're more than welcome to interrupt me and ask. We will go from here, a little 5-minute break, and then we'll go into our panel discussion session around these topics. So we'll get input and ask some questions of our mentors around these topics. So perhaps even jot down your questions as you think of them as well, because we'll just make sure that we've got plenty of time to have those conversational side. So if you do have something, please just take yourself off mute and speak, because you're over here and my screen's over here, my camera's over here, and the chat is a little further aside. So if you want to get my attention, just take yourself off mute and speak, and then I'll hear you. But when it comes to legal considerations, obviously I am not a lawyer. We will have Ben joining us a little bit later on today as one of our mentors, and Dallas is here as our experts. So I'm prefacing this by saying I'm covering some very simple questions that you might ask yourself for when you're going to be considering where you stand legally and what you need to be doing. And I always like to preface it with, begin with the end in mind. How do you want something to end? And generally, you don't want to end up in jail. You don't want to end up bankrupt, those sorts of things. So how can you prepare yourself and protect yourself to make sure that you're going to exit this business at the end of the day, whatever that might look like, the way you want to? And are you preparing yourself for that? So how do you want your business to end? So generally it'll end through 3 ways. It'll either fail, because you'll run out of money, run out of market, or run out of energy. You will pass away. So at some point you will die. That unfortunately is inevitable for all of us. But if it happens earlier than you expect, are you prepared for that? And what will happen to your business? And then the ideal situation for most of us is to exit by sale. And what does that look like? So are you thinking about that and preparing yourself legally to be able to do that at some point you know, in the future, whether that's a short term, maybe this is a business that you're building up to sell quite quickly and turnover, but otherwise it may be something you want to, you know, work on for an extended period of time and sell much later in the future. Either way, it's good to be thinking about it now and what does that look like. The next one is what assets have you started to create or intend to create? It could be around a process, it could be around a product, it's also around your brand and how are you protecting those. So we're thinking things, as Dallas mentioned, like intellectual property. As you create that, what does that look like? How can you protect that? You know, patents, trademarks, all those types of things. Who are you dealing with is the next question. So have you got business partners? Then you're starting to think about how do we, you know, legally consider that partnership or that company structure or whatever it might be. What does that look like? Are you bringing on investors? What does that look like? Have you got employees? Also, you know, you're probably either part of a supply chain or almost certainly reliant on one. So where do you fit in that, and how reliant are you that if something goes wrong in the chain that your business will survive, and how do you protect yourself there? And also you're dealing with clients, and we know that as much as we love our customers, they don't always see it from our point of view, so we have to make sure that we've protected ourselves and them right from the beginning as well. And then thinking about the rules that you need to comply with, so things like licenses or permits, regulatory requirements, and we don't all love to read the, you know, all the documents and the terminology and legal stuff that comes out. But lawyers do apparently, so you know, we want to rely on their knowledge, but also the comprehension of that is really important. So what do you need to actually comply with? Do you understand what that means? If you're leasing premises, for example, privacy, you're probably going to be collecting a lot of data, a lot of information, personal phone numbers and contact details and credit card details and all of that sort of stuff, as well as perhaps engaging with people early in the process where your product, you know, may be quite vulnerable. Can you, you know, make sure that the protection is there for your ideas and concepts as well. Also payments, it's also important to very much consider the rules that you need to comply with around collecting payment information, making sure that you're doing that in the right way. As someone who just had their credit card hacked 2 weeks ago, please make sure you've got that covered. And health and safety, of course, and, you know, yes, COVID, but always the health and safety of yourself, your staff, your customers and everyone involved, and what do you need to be doing to comply with that. So therefore sort of basic questions that we ask, and obviously with subsets within them, when you're thinking about what you need to be doing legally. And sometimes we look at that and go, wow, that's a lot. The next little thing I like to do is just a little bit of a risk matrix. So if you're thinking about those questions, you can think about the potential situations that may come as part of those questions that you've asked. And then you can plot out the potential activity that may arise and say, does it have a high chance or a low chance of happening? And if it happens, will it have a high impact or a low impact on my business? And put them into the various quadrants. So if it's a high chance and a high impact, you really want to be prepared for that. You want to make sure you've got yourself covered. Where if it's a low impact, low chance, maybe you just need to be aware that there's potential, but you know, it's unlikely it's going to happen. And if it happens, it's not going to make a big dent in your activity. So maybe you just need to be aware of that. And of course, care and beware are a little, you know, on the edges there, that you certainly, if you're in a business where if something happens, it's going to have a high impact, but it's fairly low chance that it's going to happen, you still need to be aware of that. And, you know, maybe it's not going to be your main priority to focus on that just yet, but still it may move towards that. And obviously we care about things that can happen, but if they're having a very low impact on our business, on our people, then yeah, it's not such an issue. So you can sort of start to place that, and particularly when you're thinking about your time and money at the beginning, it's much better that you spend that time and money in the prepare section than just in the aware section. So hopefully that helps you a little in thinking that through. So the next little topic that I just wanted to raise a few probably thinking points is around negotiations. And this is a really big topic, really, and something that a lot of people really struggle with. So I just wanted to touch on a few, I guess, tips. So when approaching negotiations, and you may have more questions about these, and these are certainly something that we can raise in our panel session and in your one-on-one conversations if this is something that you are challenged by. But when it comes to negotiations, the first thing always is to do your research on the organisation and the people that you're going to be dealing with. One, to make sure you want to, and two, to know who you're playing with. Always as well, seek some perspective through the discussion around their pains and gains. Don't assume that you know what they're wanting. So seek that clarity. What are they seeing from their side? Can you put yourself in their shoes? Defining your goals beforehand. What does this opportunity mean to your business, to your organisation, and what is your goal in actually entering into this conversation to start to negotiate? What do you want? Consider the timing as well. Desperation is something that kills a lot of negotiation conversations because people will give in too soon because they're desperate. So avoid having to rush, try and plan things ahead of time if you can, and be as well prepared as you can be to handle the time that it takes to negotiate, because sometimes it can be quite some time. Also practice remaining calm and avoiding unhelpful emotion. Seen many people get angry, upset, you know, in a time of negotiating something where it's really not helpful. So practice remaining calm, and if that's something you have challenge with, then, you know, look for ways that you can address that for yourself. Also learn to listen and seek clarity. So learn to ask those questions that help you actually understand what someone's really saying, as opposed to what you think they might be saying, or you filling in the gaps and bringing in bias. So learn how to actually listen carefully, but seek that clarity as well. Ask for what you want is another thing in negotiating. It's no point assuming that they know what you want or thinking that they get the point if they haven't sought clarity as well. So be very clear about what it is that you want from that. And of course, look for creative win-win solutions where both parties are happy, or multiple parties, if that's the case, are happy with the outcome. That's ideal. And also remember that building relationships does take time and effort, and that is generally what you're doing, particularly where you want this to be an ongoing business relationship over many years to come. You want to get it off the ground on a good foot. So take your time if you can to actually build those relationships there. And don't just give in to conditions that will deteriorate your business. Unfortunately, and I probably haven't introduced myself to some of you, but my background is a bit over 22 years in the finance industry. And a lot of what I saw were businesses being, you know, damaged because they'd gone into a contract with somebody that had conditions in it that just was going to ruin them from the very beginning. So yeah, they never really considered that, and they gave in just to get the money without thinking of what it would actually do to their business as a whole. So think about those things as some tips for when you're negotiating. And it can be, so just to clarify as well, negotiation isn't always about a financial contract. It can be around a relationship to help you develop your product, you know, pilots, all of those sorts of things, paid or unpaid. There's a lot of negotiation that happens in our lives, so just keep those in mind. Then the next little topic that we wanted to cover this morning, and I'm just, yeah, time-wise is not too bad, is around raising capital. So this is a conversation piece that, as we briefly mentioned last week, is very good for you to consider well ahead of time. But there's a lot of things that you need to be doing if you're looking to raise capital, and there's also multiple ways to raise as well. But one of the most critical things that I see, and again, putting my banker hat on, you know, is people not understanding their cash flow, and particularly with startups, if you're still in that startup phase, you may not have cash flow, like you might not have any revenue coming in initially, or if your business has been running for a while, perhaps you understand what it is for what you have been doing. But if you're transitioning into something new, you may not understand what that's going to look like, and it's potentially going to be quite different. So as your business progresses, though, really paying attention to how cash moves through your business is really important. And even though you know, a lot of people have, you know, a bookkeeper and an accountant, or you know, their wife might do the books or whatever it is, you still need to be across that all the time. Even if you're not, you know, the finance officer of your business, you still need to understand how cash is moving through your business. Clarifying your assumptions for revenue and frequency is another point that we often see. You know, if you sit down and look at someone's cash flow projection, there's a number there, but there's no clarity, no explanation as to what that relates to. People don't often consider the likelihood that something may fall over. How often do deals fall over? How often do people not pay on time? All of those sorts of things. So when you're putting revenue into your cash flow, make sure that you're making a side note. And certainly if you're using a spreadsheet, which is recommended, you can add comments, you know, this relates to whatever, and keep that in mind. Because when you reflect on this later, which I strongly recommend you do on a regular basis, you want to make sure that you're actually comparing what really happened to what you believed would happen. And if you didn't write down what you believed it would be, your thoughts around that can alter based on what you know happened. So it makes it quite challenging to then forecast again into the future with those biases that you're bringing with it. Also, in terms of you know, capital raising, determining do you really need to raise additional funds and why, and a cash flow will help you in understanding that, because you can see it all laid out on paper. Often, you know, we would have people come and want, you know, $100,000 to purchase a new piece of equipment, but really there was no need for them to borrow those funds. Or similarly, maybe they needed to actually borrow $200,000 because $100,000 would purchase it, but they needed to, you know, train someone to use it, and that was going to cost them another $100,000. So, you know, thinking about those things and how they all piece together is very important. The other thing, and I put this in, and sometimes people don't understand why, but planning when you can take a break. If you are a small business, maybe there's only a couple of you running your business, you cannot work 365 days a year, 10 years in a row, and not take a break, not burn yourself out, or at least not give yourself the chance to have a break and come back and be strong for your business, mentally and physically. So when you're looking at your cash flow projection over a period of time, you can start to see, you know, seasonalities. And again, I have more of an agri hat on than a mining hat in this case, but you know, still there's going to be peaks and troughs and flows within every industry. So looking at that and deciding when can you step away from your business, financially and obviously activity-wise as well. The next point around having structure to your spending, we frequently see businesses go into much more debt than necessary, just simply because of how they structure their spending, when they're paying for things, when, you know, they're purchasing pieces of equipment, you know, how they've structured their loan repayments even, or how they've structured their employment contracts, you know, looking at vesting, all those different types of things, really thinking about the structure of when you're giving away something from your business, be it money, obviously in the time of cash flow, or equity as well. Running a cash flow projection and also obviously reviewing your profit and loss in retrospect allows you to start to gain certainty through that data and the repetition, learning where you're right and where you're wrong. And again, this is where it comes back to your assumptions and your beliefs around what's going to happen in your business. If you can see quite clearly and document the fact that you were wrong in what you assumed was going to happen, providing you learn from that, it can certainly help you move forward. And if you're having a conversation with an investor or a banker or anyone who's potentially going to, you know, risk their own finances to help you move your business forward, they're going to want to understand who you are as a person and what you do behaviourally, in regards to finances. And a lot of people act quite differently in regards to their finances than they do in regards to, let's say, their research and development. And there's a whole host of reasons for that, which we won't go into today, but we want to know that. So as an investor, we want to know, who am I dealing with, and how do you react to money? How do you treat money? And can you actually be, you know, analytical and logical about it, so that you're making good decisions with that investment going forward? And the more you can show that, what you've done in the past, what you've learned from that, and how you've changed your practices going forward, the more confidence an investor will gain. And then the other thing is the impacts of offering payment terms and the impacts of paying your bills too soon. And whilst we generally, you know, think that we're doing someone a favour if we're paying our bills on time, and we are, that, you know, if we are doing that, it could be potentially damaging our business. I'm not saying on time, but early. On time is good. But similarly, offering payment terms, can you actually afford to do that? And it can come in as part of your negotiation as well. That if you're allowing for, you know, someone to pay you 90 days post, then, you know, you have to carry that debt throughout that period of time, and that may limit your ability to actually start to gain new customers and bring new customers into the fold, start to develop new product, a whole host of things, without perhaps going into further debt yourself. Which, you know, may negate any benefit you got from that particular deal in the first instance. So making sure that you understand those. Now, a lot of payment terms are dictated, and particularly when you're dealing with large organisations, you know, they may have, you know, 90 days post payment terms. You have to factor that in to your negotiation in the beginning, because if you have to carry debt throughout that period, you know, you may need to just basically increase your price from the beginning to be able to cover what it is. So knowing that, though, is important, and the only way you'll know is to have run the numbers and see what an impact it's going to have. So the other thing that's really important is making sure that you do understand a thing called burn rate. So there's a few different ways that people describe that, but my basic thing with burn rate is the amount that you spend each month just to operate, whether you're pre-revenue or post-revenue. So if you are, you know, spending money on salaries, you're spending money on rent, you're spending money on perhaps advertising, certainly research and development, around, you know, brand development, all those sorts of things, you have to pay for them whether you actually make a sale or not. So that burn rate obviously equates to how long can you live as a business, based on the amount of money you have at the beginning. And if you don't know what that number is and you're talking to an investor, they're probably not going to deal with you, because you have to understand, you have to know these things and understand what they are, to be able to have a conversation about them without necessarily having to go back and look at your spreadsheets or find somebody or ask somebody. So there's some basic things. So customer acquisition cost is another one, and it can be very difficult in the beginning to gauge what that is when you haven't actually acquired a customer yet. It's almost impossible, but you can you know, set some figures around it to start with. But what does it cost you to acquire a customer? And then the lifetime value is the other thing that an investor will generally want to know. How much can you earn from this customer over your relationship lifetime? Not just how much they're going to pay you in the first instance, but are they likely to be a repeat customer, and for how long? And what does that look like? So if those things are out of balance, so if it costs you more to acquire a customer than what you can earn from them over the lifetime, your business won't last very long. Of course, you want to try and tilt the balance back the other way so that you can ensure that your business will grow and have money to expand in the future as well. So looking at your expenses is really important, and understanding where that money is going out of your business, particularly in the early stages when you may not have any money coming in. And also, what capital items do you need? So when we say raising capital, it's often, you know, for either a new business to get started or for a business to expand. But sometimes people do raise what they call capital for operating expenses. It's not really the same thing. It's just, yeah, you're not going to grow if you're just operating. So depending on what you're doing, and I know there's some exceptions now with tech businesses, but you want to make sure that you understand all of those things. You know, what is it costing you to buy the materials you need? What is your rent and your salaries and all those things costing you? How much are you spending on advertising, or how much do you need to be spending on advertising to actually reach your audience? You know, what do you need to buy to be able to operate? And certainly, what do you need in the future to be able to grow and expand and deliver to your customers to be able to make your business viable? So all of those things, again, are really important for you to be across, even if you're not the finance officer of your business. And this, just a little table, basically says the same thing. So you have a certain amount of money at the beginning, you have income and expenses and account balance, and then what is short is the amount of funds you require. But again, it's not just for 1 month, it's over a period of time. And we usually suggest that you're looking at this 3 to 5 years into the future as a minimum, because you don't want to be trying to raise money like every month just to get by. So you want to be thinking longer term. And if you aren't familiar, I just threw in a little table. I'm hoping that you're all familiar, but yeah, general way you're looking at it is similar to a P&L. You know, what is the income? What are the costs of goods? What should our gross profit be? We're at fixed expenses and variable expenses gives us a net profit. Then we've got capital expenses that'll come out of our net profit, taxes, of course, loan repayments if you've already borrowed money, and then your account balance at the bottom. And of course, if you're looking to raise capital, that account balance basically will be negative if you haven't raised. Otherwise, you probably don't need to raise. So yeah, making sure that you can see all of that and what that looks like. And then the other thing is finding funds. So a lot of businesses nowadays don't look to raise investment funds at all. They just look to be able to generate a business that can make sales and have a sufficient margin on their product to be able to produce a profit to then reinvest back into their business to be able to grow and scale. Obviously, borrowing money is common. Bootstrapping, so that's using your own funds. Generally, that's where most people start, but not everybody. Seeking investment, so that can be investment from private investment or investment through you know, organisations. Looking at grants, and you know, we're quite fortunate here in Australia. There's a lot of different grants available that can help you do different things if you have the time and energy to apply for them and the skill. Seeking donations, and that's not always money. Sometimes it's a donation of, you know, secondhand equipment or something like that that can help you progress forward without having to spend. Sponsorship, probably not so much for what you're doing, but sometimes seeking a sponsor can help you move forward with something. Crowdfunding, becoming more popular in a lot of sectors. Memberships and events can be other ways to raise funds depending on what your